Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And today we're going to be talking about one of those foundation things that we need, and that is writing, and writing well, or I could say writing good, right? But we're going to, we're going to be talking to an expert about how to do that, because we often think, eek, I'm not a good writer. So please join me in welcoming Grace Aldridge Foster to our program today. Welcome, Grace. How are you doing?
Thank you, Deb. I am well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Great. Well, let me tell people just a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. Now, here's the cool thing. Before we jump into this, we just finished up a month of programs with AI. And we're going to actually continue that. This is going to be a lot of discussion about using AI to write. So very cool, very cool. So anyhow, Bold Type co-founder Grace Aldridge Foster has been training writers for over a decade. She has worked with organizations including these little guys: Capital One, Johnson & Johnson, Biogen, the U.S. Special Operations Command, the Aspen Institute, and the D.C. Public Education Fund. She has taught professional writing at Georgetown University's School of Continuing Studies and at the McDonough School of Business. Her own writing has appeared in academic publications, the Smithsonian Insider, and Forbes, where she is a careers and leadership contributor. Holy schmoly, Grace. What a great bio.
Thank you so much, Deb. I haven't slept a lot in the last day.
I know, we all look at our bios and we're like, wow. But I always like to know how it is that my guests got to where they are today. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, sure thing. My job teaching professionals how to write better at work is not a job that I knew existed when I was an English major in college. At the time when I was coming up, the message that I received basically was, "Oh, you're an English major? Oh dear, you could be
you're going to teach."
Exactly. Well, you could be a teacher, or this was always the line or the implication, or if you're really ambitious, you could be an attorney. You could go to school and be an attorney.
Now that's different.
I know, and it's so funny that those were kind of like the two options presented to me. I didn't really want to do either of those things. I didn't want to be a high school teacher. I didn't want to be an attorney. Both wonderful career paths, obviously. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I wanted to be a college professor, teach literature courses right at the college level. And that's what I had in mind when I went to graduate school at Georgetown University in DC. And while I was a grad student in Georgetown, I was working in the writing center there, where students can come and one-on-one, the tutors give them feedback on their writing. My boss at the time, the director of the writing center, had a friend who was looking for someone to teach writing classes to special forces teams in North Carolina outside of Fort Bragg. And my boss at the time recommended me for this job. I had raging imposter syndrome. I had no idea.
And why do special forces teams need to know how to write? Would have been my first thought. Aren't they just supposed to go shoot and,
Exactly. But here's the thing. After they go shoot, they have to write reports and they have emails, right, about those things that they've gone to do. And so, what often ends up happening is you have these very elite, operators. They're very smart. They are so good at what they do, but they they've never been taught how to write well.
Right.
That wasn't the focus,
No, because
They're-
many would have been athletes. Not that athletes don't know how to do the right, but
yeah,
yeah.
and some enlist after high school, so
Mm-hmm.
they haven't gone through, a college level composition course or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. That said, it's really not the mechanics of writing,
Mm-hmm.
that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
It's more writing strategy,
Mm-hmm.
how to write for a particular
Mm-hmm.
audience, how to
Mm-hmm.
include the right level of detail. So
Mm-hmm.
I too did not know that was
Mm-hmm.
something that those guys needed, but that's kind of how I got into this
Okay.
school, and then realized, professionals in all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
industries need this type of training. There are
Mm-hmm.
huge gaps between what you learn about writing in
Mm-hmm.
school and then the writing that you're
Mm-hmm.
expected to do in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And no one or not many people are
Mm-hmm.
really filling those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what my partner Casey and I, my business partner Casey and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do. And we started Bold Type is
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to create training programs that would teach professionals
Mm-hmm.
the critical writing skills
Mm-hmm.
they needed to be effective in the workplace that no one taught them in school.
Right. And as you were talking, I was thinking about this and I thought, now I don't have kids, so I have no idea what, curriculum is. But, when I was in school, and I'm old enough to be your mother, when I was in school, we took writing, we took all of those things starting in, pretty young, probably even elementary, but definitely in junior high and high school. We had to take all of those classes. We also had to write it out by hand, right? Using that little funny word called cursive. Um, you know, and but and then even when I went to college, we still had to take English classes. But one of the things that I also did, because it was the dark ages, we read a lot.
Yes.
And I wonder how much that has changed with the fact that people are just more on their screens. They're not picking up, you and I were talking about physical books before the program started. They're not picking up books, even if they're reading, maybe it's online, all those various things. Do you think that has kind of changed our mentality about writing?
I think there's got to be something to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in order to be a good writer,
Mm-hmm.
you must read a lot. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, it's something that most of the best writers I know are also avid readers. I guess I'll
Right.
put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that one thing that I've thought about a lot is the way people read. It's not just the amount that people read.
Right.
The
Mm-hmm.
way they read has
Mm-hmm.
changed, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we listen to audiobooks now.
Mm-hmm.
I know so many people who are podcast enthusiasts who
Mm-hmm.
listen to podcasts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not one of those like reading snobs who thinks that like listening to a book on Audible
Mm-hmm.
doesn't count as reading, but
Mm-hmm.
it is different. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of those differences is that you don't see the language as
Right.
listening
Mm-hmm.
to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of like the connection between reading and
Mm-hmm.
writing, I think part of the reason that reading makes you a better
Mm-hmm.
writer is you're seeing the
Mm-hmm.
sentence structures
Mm-hmm.
as you're, comprehending
Mm-hmm.
them. And you don't get that
Mm-hmm.
when you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
You might be getting all the benefits of what
Mm-hmm.
you learn about a topic,
Mm-hmm.
or you are absorbing the same plot, the same characters. You're being
Mm-hmm.
enriched
Mm-hmm.
certainly while you're listening, to
Mm-hmm.
those stories or to those
Right.
books.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that you're
Mm-hmm.
getting the same value in terms of or that I don't know
Mm-hmm.
that it translates to your
Mm-hmm.
actual grasp
Right.
of writing in the
Mm-hmm.
same way.
Right. And I'll admit, when I am reading something, with the other part of my brain kicks in, and like I'm taking an online course right now. It's not an inexpensive course. And I keep seeing the typos on her slides, that probably 99, well, she clearly didn't see them. 99% of people would never see that. Or I think, oh, that's not AP style, because I'm a PR person, right? And so that's how I learned to write. And so, but that's just kind of funny. And then I get lost in looking for the errors as opposed to paying attention to the content. So, I like in this course, what I've started doing is she's pretty much reading word for word what's on the slides. And that's, that's great, because, and she's not putting a lot on each slide. So that's okay. But to keep myself from being sidetracked, I close my eyes. And so then I'm just listening to it and getting it from an auditory perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I think what you're doing there too is you're helping yourself to focus, but you're also
Mm-hmm.
helping to prevent yourself from multitasking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is one of the things too, where I think back to, what we were just talking
Mm-hmm.
about, that when you're listening
Mm-hmm.
to a book or something like that
Mm-hmm.
too, right, you can multitask. So
Mm-hmm.
you can be cleaning, you can
Mm-hmm.
be driving. It's one of the reasons I like,
Mm-hmm.
listening to audiobooks, because
Mm-hmm.
I get
Right.
to
Mm-hmm.
read more that
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
because I can multitask. But you're also, it doesn't require the same type of focus
Mm-hmm.
from you, right? When you sit down with a book,
Mm-hmm.
a physical book, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you can't multitask.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually like probably one of the least stimulating things you
Mm-hmm.
can do in terms of all the inputs that we're
Mm-hmm.
used to. So
Right.
it requires a
Mm-hmm.
certain type of effort that we're not accustomed
Mm-hmm.
to give anymore. So,
Right.
but I think it's interesting hearing you talk about, rather than trying to read it with your eyes and
Mm-hmm.
with your ears, just choosing one or
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
other. And yeah, that's really neat.
Right. Well, and of course, it's hard to sit down and find time to read. And obviously people do it in a variety of ways. My husband is a very avid reader. He needs total silence. I mean, earplugs, the whole works. And I am one now. It actually doesn't matter if I'm reading a business book or fiction. TV can be on. I can, and in fact, if it's fiction, I will block out whatever that is. If it's a business book where I'm just kind of skimming it, well, I might still also be watching what's on TV. But and I think that's part of it too, is we think, well, it takes so much time to do. And so that's where it's like, okay, I just want the Cliff Notes version, all those various things. And most people don't even know what a Cliff Notes version is. Do they sell Cliff Notes? You've been in academia. Do
Oh,
they still sell those?
they must, but the thing is, you can find them online, and
Right.
actually, you can ask
Mhm.
AI to do these
I
things for
know.
you. So,
Oh my gosh, Adobe. Now I subscribe to Adobe, and so I have a different level, but it has now added a feature where if I open a PDF, it will ask me, "Do you want an AI generated synopsis of the story?"
wow.
And I've tried it a couple of times, and obviously it depending on the length of whatever it is, it depends on how long it takes to generate it. And so I did one that was about a 200-page book, and it really did do a pretty good job at summarizing it. I was surprised.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best ways to use
Hmm.
AI is to ask it to
Hmm.
summarize long pieces of
Hmm.
text. I mean, of course, I like hate to think that that's going to that
Right. Hmm.
replace people reading
Hmm.
something, but if the choice is like
Hmm.
not reading it
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
all, or
Hmm.
getting a good summary of it,
Hmm.
then I would of course take the
Hmm.
summary over not reading it at all. But
Hmm.
that is interesting, and I think that one thing, this is kind of a side note, but something that I was just looking at
Hmm.
yesterday that's on my mind is I was playing with Grammarly Go,
Hmm.
which is one of my favorite AI tools
Hmm.
for writing, and it
Hmm.
plugs into your email.
Hmm.
So what it will do is if you hit reply to an
Hmm.
email that you've received and you have Grammarly Go plugged in, it will offer you a summary of the email that you just received
Oh.
and then you can ask it to
Hmm.
draft a response,
Hmm.
or you can draft your own,
Hmm.
right? The summaries are really good if it's like an actual, a person wrote that email
Hmm.
to you. It does not do a good job with email newsletters, right? So there might be
Hmm.
like multiple
Right.
sections.
It gets a little confused, probably.
Every one that I looked at was not even close
Oh no.
to right. So
Hmm.
it's and so this is
Hmm.
also why
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
human judgment is
Hmm.
still very important. You can, even
Right.
if you're asking AI to
Hmm.
summarize something for
Hmm.
you, you at least
Hmm.
need the skimming
Hmm.
skills to sort of double check that it
Right. Yeah,
is.
because it might not be right. And we talk a lot about AI and the fact that it hallucinates,
Yes.
which I love the fact that that is the term that people have started using. And in essence, it means it gets it wrong. And either it has brought in the wrong data, brought in the wrong interpretation, the wrong facts, or sometimes it's just flat out wrong. And you're like, where did that come from? But it's not. It is kind of funny that they call it hallucinating.
Yes, and I love I know I can't think of his name, but I watched it's old now, maybe a couple years old, but the 60 Minutes interview with the Google CEO talking
Hmm.
about Gen AI, and his definition for hallucination is
Hmm.
error with confidence.
Hmm.
And I love that
Hmm.
definition. It's
Hmm.
not just that it's wrong, it's
Hmm.
confidently wrong.
Yeah, I'm going to stand proud behind giving you the wrong
Yes.
information.
So if you don't know that it
Hmm.
is your responsibility, or
Hmm.
that it's necessary to
Hmm.
kind of double
Hmm.
check, it won't even occur to you,
Right.
that
Hmm.
that AI could be
Hmm.
getting it wrong. But yeah, it
Hmm.
gets it wrong with
Hmm.
confidence.
Right. And I'm sure that's well, and we've seen that it is getting better and better with that. Of course, the big issue is that there's so much content, and it's having to decide, is this right? Is this wrong? And that's where it can just get it wrong. And of course, we could do that too. If we were doing our own research, we could look at one source and it says X, we could look at another source, it says Y, and then we have to decide, what's right or wrong. And in most cases, it's a combination, right?
That's right. That's
Mm-hmm.
right. And ultimately you're responsible
Mm-hmm.
for anything that AI produces
Mm-hmm.
on your
Mm-hmm.
behalf, or
Mm-hmm.
anything that AI tells you. So I think the accountability piece is interesting, because let's say AI gets it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and you use,
Mm-hmm.
AI's sort of
Right.
like incorrect assessment,
Mm-hmm.
versus you get it wrong
Mm-hmm.
and you use your own incorrect, sort of assessment, or whatever it might be. I think if someone else sees that it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. You think, do you want to blame AI, or do you
Mm-hmm.
want to take, do you want to take accountability for that
Right.
yourself? What is
Mm-hmm.
the next step
Mm-hmm.
if someone else realizes
Mm-hmm.
something that you've written
Mm-hmm.
or produced, or something
Mm-hmm.
is incorrect? Anyway, personally, it's not like I want to get something wrong, but I would rather, sort of be able to say, like, oh, okay, I misunderstood that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how I
Right.
can
Mm-hmm.
correct it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's like a path forward
Mm-hmm.
there if I
Mm-hmm.
got it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
versus, if the AI program I
Mm-hmm.
used got it wrong, what's the
Mm-hmm.
path forward?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Well, and in many cases, if it's wrong in AI, it was because it didn't have correct prompts.
Yes. Yeah.
And so maybe it needed more detail. I was having it look for speaking opportunities for me, and I use several AI programs, and I use one called Sintra. And it's got it. I know they're bots, but I call them critters. And so it's got these little critters, and there's like 10 of them, and each one does a different thing. And so I was working with the personal development one. And I said, I'm looking for speaking opportunities pertaining to speaking to medical groups in um, in Georgia. Tell me five uh, opportunities, and it right and came back with five right away. And I thought these are really cool, but they're in the country of Georgia as opposed to the state of Georgia. And because I was reading them and I thought, I don't know where that town is. And then I realized, well, that's because it's by Russia. And so then I went back and I said, to clarify, these, I need Georgia in the United States. And then it went boogity boogity and it came up with things. But yeah, I mean, it was not that it was wrong. I gave it not enough information.
Yes, that's right. And yeah, that's right. And using, as we all know, it's like prompt engineering is a
Mhm.
whole new
I know.
well,
How long before colleges start offering it as a degree?
not long. I am
Hmm.
sure. I
Hmm.
think there are already certificate programs in
Hmm.
it. You know
Yep. Hmm.
what is interesting? Prompt engineering, that is a writing task. It's
Hmm.
writing. It
Right.
requires
Yes. Hmm.
writing skills. So I
Hmm.
do think it's very interesting to me
Hmm.
when, I hear from clients, people I've
Hmm.
worked with, who hate writing, right?
Hmm.
They say
Hmm.
that, like, they dislike writing, or they're bad at it. And so they're so thrilled to use AI
Hmm.
to help them produce their writing.
Hmm.
But I think what is so interesting is, in fact, they are having to write
Right. Hmm.
this new
Hmm.
genre, right?
Hmm.
Which is prompting,
Hmm.
that they weren't having to do before. And they're
Hmm.
in many cases doing it quite well. And so I just think
Right.
it's so
Hmm.
funny that the irony,
Hmm.
people saying, oh, I hate writing, or I'm
Hmm.
bad at it, therefore I will
Hmm.
use AI.
Hmm.
But in fact, they're doing an excellent
Hmm.
job writing these prompts. They're not
Right.
as bad at writing as they
Hmm.
think they
Hmm.
are.
Right. And I laughed when I read your LinkedIn profile because you say many of the professionals I've worked with believe they are bad at writing and don't enjoy doing it. And I was like, that's me. That's me. And that's why I like AI, because it takes my what I think of as in the right and spiffs it up. In fact, I will tell it that improve this paragraph that I wrote. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. And there are times I'm like, no, I wouldn't use that word, which I think that's the key that many people need to always remember is it's a draft. But this brings me back to the thought that, we talk about, do we read, do we not read? I think a big part of why we don't read, whatever it is it's not well written. And I think especially when it's business things, when I'm on somebody's website or their brochure or whatever it is, if it's not well written, I'm probably not going to work with them. And so that's what I love is that, you're really working with businesses to help them through that. So tell us more about that.
Well, that's right. And I just want to add to what you're saying there. People are dealing with, they're having to process and sift through more information than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
They're overwhelmed. They're
Mm-hmm.
inundated with information, written information
Mm-hmm.
included. And our attention spans are shorter than ever before, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're having to make quicker and quicker decisions about what it's going to be worth our time to read or who it's going to be worth our time to invest in. And writing is often the first impression that we have of someone, right? Whether it's a website or their bio or an email from them or whatever. So I think that many people are doing what you are doing, and those first impressions linger, and in a lot of cases there won't be a second impression. So I do think our writing says something about us beyond just the content of our message. Does our writing inspire confidence? Does it help to hold and engage someone's attention? Personally, I feel like there's like this debt of gratitude. If someone makes it easy for me to pay attention to what they've written, I'm halfway there, right? Like it's amazing. So I do think that, business owners, especially people who are working in industries where they don't think of writing as being a critical skill, they tend to overlook how important their web copy or their, email outreach or whatever is, because they think, well, I'm an engineer or I'm an accountant. This doesn't really matter. It does, though, because people are making super quick decisions about how professional you are, about how trustworthy you are, about how interesting or engaging or easy it will be to work with you. So I think it's getting more important than ever to make sure that your writing is telling the correct story and that it is serving as sort of like this initial value proposition, for what it's going to be like for someone to spend more of their time with you.
Right. And I think the big thing that you said is professionalism. When I read somebody's email or, and it's typically an email or, where they've written it quickly, if the website content, things like that, more than likely they will have, still might not be written well, but the typos, things like that are hopefully gone. But when I read somebody's email, it just drives me nuts when there's mistakes in it. And or text messages. And of course, we have an entire generation that grew up just texting. I worked for a big insurance company, and I was the head of communications for our area. And I had asked one of the people that worked for me to draft an email that the president needed something here, draft an email for him. Now, my mistake was in not saying I need to see it first, because she sent it to him. And I get this phone call. Now, our phones were really funny because they had caller ID. And so I see his name and I thought, uh-oh. And so, of course, I answer with a different tone of voice, right? Because I'm talking to the CEO. And, and he doesn't say hi. He doesn't say boo. He says, fire her. And I went, what are we talking about? And she had written this email like she was writing a text message. So it didn't say LOL, but I mean, she had shortened words. She had done all sorts of things. And I told him, I said, okay, not going to fire her. I said, we're going to use this as a teaching moment for all of us. And so I went to her and I said, okay, first of all, my mistake in not saying I need to look at it first. But this is a well-educated young woman, right? It never occurred to me that she would send him something that was like that. But I told her, I said, anytime you're communicating with anyone, I don't care who it is, but certainly the CEO, you don't write it like you're writing a text message. And it really was a learning moment. He didn't make me fire her, but I did make her rewrite it. I mean, it was like, okay, now you have the assignment, you failed, we're going to give you a chance to get an A on it. But I think we see that as we see people who are so used to writing very quickly that's how they tend to communicate then all the time.
Yeah. And yes, and to view it compassionately, which some people struggle to do, but I think it's helpful. If you think about it, it's also the communication platforms that we have developed for work mimic sort of. So Slack, right? Various forms of instant messaging, right? On Microsoft Teams, because it functionally works so much more like texting than it does, like email, for example. I think that, there are a lot of young professionals in particular who, you're right, like they grow up, they're texting all of the time, and then they get to work and they're handed something like Slack. And not that you should Slack just like you text either, but
right.
And so then they're asked to write an email and have some compassion for these people, right?
They've not been taught any other way.
Exactly. And again, those workplace communication structures, some of them are designed to be more casual. And so I see this happen all the time, like exactly like what you're talking about, especially younger professionals newer to the workforce who no one has taught them. They just don't know. And it ends up being really, really embarrassing, for everyone.
Yeah. Fire her. Yikes. And you are a teacher, an educator. How do what happens when now I taught at Metro State many years ago, which is in Denver. And even back then, I mean, this would have been 15 years ago. I would get things and think, no, but I never, I always gave them the opportunity to redo it. But how do you convince anybody that they really need to be writing better? I keep having to watch how I word things so that I'm not sounding like an idiot either.
Definitely don't sound like an idiot. Well, one of the tactics that I try to use both in a traditional classroom setting and in my company's corporate trainings is looking at writing samples and asking people to describe if this was the first thing, the first introduction you had, all you had to go on, this proposal that I'm going to put on the screen or this email, what words would you use to describe them? And this exercise makes a big impact on people because
interesting.
Yeah, I'll put up this, really well, actually, sometimes I put up something that's technically well written, right? That, like there are no typos, it's polished, it's formal. Technically, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's these huge blocks of text.
Boring.
Text wall and like, okay, first impressions, you haven't even read a word. What do you, or you have a few seconds to tell me, what do you associate with this person? What are your assumptions about them? And we'll say things like, ugh, they're long-winded, they're self-important, they are not considerate of my time and effort, right? So I think that exercises like that can help people understand how important your writing is. If this is what writing is, if this is what you assume about writing that looks like this, it stands to reason that other people are drawing assumptions about you based on the writing that you send them. And so we talk about first impressions a lot, and I follow that up with a lot of the research behind attention spans, and something called interaction cost, right? Like how much perceived effort does the document take from you in order to reach your goals with it, right? How much, and it can be sobering, but it seems to get through to people. And I find that if we don't start with that, then I have a lot less buy-in, right? Because people don't think that it matters.
Right.
They think that their writing matters. But if you start with something like that, we start talking about the stakes, we talk about those first impressions, then people are more willing, to put in time and effort improving their writing.
Right. And I think the thing that we all need to remember is who our audience is, right? If we're writing a technical paper that's going to, say, college professors, then it's going to be written very different than if you were writing something for teenagers. And that's where we kind of get caught up, and especially in business writing. And I talk about this a lot on the program, knowing who your audience is. Are they well educated? Are they, what is their age? All of those things, because it annoys me when somebody says, I write, everything I write is for the 6th grade level. Well, I'm going to read that and think this sounds dumb, right? And so you need to figure out who, and I mean, those are just basic marketing principles. Who are you writing for? You're going to have outliers on either side, right? But you need to know, are you writing for kids? Are you writing for adults? Are you writing for educated adults? Who is your audience? And then I think that's where AI can really start coming in. So let's talk about how we can do that. So first of all, what's your favorite AI tools? Because there might be more than one for writing. You mentioned Grammarly, but what are some other tools?
Yeah, Grammarly Go is my favorite and the one that I use the most. ChatGPT is my second most used tool for write, just the free version, right? Just in the browser. And I find that if I go to Gemini, Google Gemini in my browser or Microsoft's Copilot, it's functioning pretty similarly, right? Just to ChatGPT. So those are my favorite tools. And when we train folks, we're pretty platform agnostic or tool agnostic, because also so many organizations these days have their own internal, customized AI tool, and it's so that it's walled off. It's so that they can put in sensitive or proprietary.
Right. Yeah, because ChatGPT, those things are open, and so yeah, if you're writing company sensitive data, don't put it in the things that are out there, folks.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's why, in fact, we kind of make an effort to lean towards, tool or sort of platform agnosticism with AI, and also have a tendency towards trying to focus most of our own training efforts on free tools as well. Right. So that it's something that anyone can access, whether they have an enterprise level, Copilot plan or something like that, or not. Now, of course, there are tons of AI, very specific AI tools out there, and of course, things also that do things beyond writing. But those are some of the I use the most.
Right. And like I do the paid version of ChatGPT. It's not that much different than the free version, but what I like about it is it does graphics. I mean, it has Dolly that's in there now. I have found that Adobe AI is better than Dolly AI in an image generation. And those are funny. And I did a test one time where I used 5 different programs and I gave them all the exact same prompt to see what I would get. For one thing, they can't spell. It's the funniest thing in the world. I'm like, oh my gosh. I had one that could not spell Monday. And even when I told it, the word is Monday. All of a sudden I drew a blank. It could not spell Monday. And so but yeah, we have to find what is going to work best for us.
Yes, and I just want to just add on to what you're saying. So yes, when you ask AI tools to create graphics for you, like let's say you ask it to create a infographic or a cartoon, it is very bad about producing writing and words that not just that are spelled correctly, but that are even real words that are
I know.
in images, it does not do a good job with. So it might, at first glance, it might produce a stunning cartoon or graphic, but if you zoom in inside bubbles or things like that, it might not just be misspelled words. It might be
It
literal.
hallucinates.
Yeah. And so it's something you've really got to check for.
Right. So, say I've got a website that I'm designing. How am I going to use AI to help me write that text?
Yeah, so you already said, I have so many thoughts about this. One of what you already said something that I think is really important. AI is a great tool for helping you think more deeply about your audience, right? Who is it that you're writing for? Again, this requires some thoughtful prompting, right? But you can have it analyze, certain audiences. You also can create personas and ask it to write in the voice of, a persona that you've created, right? But then, so it can help with audience awareness. But I think that, let me back up a little bit and say one of my general recommendations for using AI when it comes to writing right now is to use it either to help you draft or use it to help you edit. But don't necessarily assume that it's going to do both of those things for you for one document, right? So use it to help you write a bad first draft, get unstuck, break your writer's block. If you hate writing, this can be a great way to like break that barrier. And then you as a human go in and edit it according to, whatever. Or you write the draft and then ask ChatGPT or whatever to refine it for you according to a set of guidelines. So one or the other, I think, is sort of what you should do. And then one of the things that I love, let's say a business owner, someone's writing website copy, one of the things that I think is so important is defining your brand voice. Right? Do this early. Think about it. How do you want to sound?
Right. Are you humorous? Are you,
Exactly. Are you casual and conversational? Are you very formal and serious? Are you warm? Are you friendly? Yeah. Do you have a sense of humor? And so think about, the demographics even of people who might be coming to your website or your ideal clients, right? And think about what's going to resonate with them. And then you can, but tone and voice are also famously subjective. It can be very difficult, especially if you're not a confident writer or an especially skilled writer. It can be very difficult to objectively kind of assess if you're actually hitting the mark with your tone. So one of the things that I love to do or instruct people to do with AI is ask it to analyze your tone and voice.
Ooh.
Right? So write your best stab at writing your website copy, and then ask AI to define the characteristics of your voice. And then if you've already brainstormed, okay, what do I want my voice to sound like? How do I want to come across, the prospective clients or whatever? And then you can look at how AI assesses your voice. Do they match? Are you there yet? Have you actually executed what it is that you hoped to accomplish in your writing? Are you coming across the way that you want to? Are you not? Of course, you could ask AI to edit it, to make it sound friendlier, more approachable, or something like that, right? So I think that especially something like web copy, something that's going to live semi-permanently and publicly, spend as much time as you must, right? Playing around with it, it, adjusting your prompts to AI, whatever, but it can help build some objective distance writing.
Right. And it's funny, I'll actually use two different programs on the same thing. I was working on a business proposal. And so I initially did it in ChatGPT because if my experience with it is it tends to be kind of more technical. And so here's what we're doing, yada, yada, yada. And I have learned to tell it, please don't respond until I tell you to, because if I accidentally hit return, it goes and it gives me all this stuff. I'm like, no, now we have to start over. But yeah, so I got the proposal, then I tweaked it to be a little bit more like me. And then I put it into Sintra. And put it in there, and I basically gave it the same information to start with. This is a proposal for yada yada yada. Here is what I have written, and then I put that whole thing in there, and I said, please rewrite to make more human, I think was the word I used. And it didn't change much, but what it changed, I really liked.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was very interesting. And I should have gone back the other way just to see what happens too when I do it that way. But and to me, it's like handing it to two different people to review.
Yeah, I love that example that you just gave. And I think that, it's not just two different AI programs
Mhm,
that you could do this with. You could also use there are tools that we recommend, like the Hemingway app, which is like
mhm,
actually it does have an integrated AI feature now as
mhm,
well, but it didn't always.
mhm,
And so you could have ChatGPT open and the Hemingway app.
mhm,
You could have ChatGPT open or Grammarly Go open
mhm,
and WebFX's
mhm,
readability tester if you want
mhm,
to assess grade level,
mhm,
for example, Flushing grade level,
mhm,
which ChatGPT can't exactly do, but it does know
mhm,
the formula for it.
mhm,
So it can sort of like give you uh, a ballpark kind of.
mhm, mhm,
But yeah, so maybe you use ChatGPT to
mhm,
draft thing for you, and then if you think about the particular metrics you want to use,
mhm,
there's a great tool I love called the difficult and extraneous word
mhm,
finder. So you
mhm,
could have ChatGPT draft something for you,
mhm,
and then you could paste it
mhm,
in the difficult and extraneous word
mhm,
finder, see which of the
mhm,
words that have been used are considered rare or hard to find, right?
mhm,
Or hard to understand.
mhm,
And then you can go back,
mhm,
and adjust just those
mhm,
words, right? So I love this idea of kind of combining
mhm,
tools for your exact goals
mhm.
and what it is that you're working on.
Right. And of course, one of the things that we hear is that it's going to take jobs away from people.
Sure.
As of right now, as we're doing this now, obviously things are going to change. I mean, 5 years ago, we would not have even been thinking about having this conversation. But it is still, it still doesn't sound quite human when
Yes.
it writes. And I think we see that like with images that it generates, things like that, because sometimes they're too perfect,
Yeah.
all of those things. And so that's where it still needs us.
Yes.
Obviously we have to write the prompts and we have to get it going, but yeah, it can't, it's not going to write a screenplay. Now it might write a good first draft of a screenplay, but then we go back in and we add the nuances, things like that.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, and sometimes um, an unexpected word choice, for
Mhm,
example, or a well-placed, creatively placed
mhm,
sentence fragment, for
mhm,
example, right? These are things that
mhm,
actually make writing sound
mhm,
so much more
mhm,
interesting, so much more
mhm,
engaging, right? And so I agree. I agree that AI generated copy is too
mhm,
perfect sometimes.
mhm,
The other thing is it can be kind of empty.
mhm,
So what I notice a lot about AI generated writing is that it sounds good on the surface,
mhm,
but then if you take your time with it, it
mhm,
can be quite empty. Like it's
mhm,
it's using words that sound good,
mhm.
but it's not especially meaningful. And
Ah. Mhm,
things down so that I wouldn't forget them. So if you see me looking over here, that's what I'm looking
mhm,
at.
mhm,
There are certain signs of
mhm,
unedited AI copy.
mhm,
Certainly they use more big words than a
mhm,
human writer might use. Like
mhm,
its vocabulary is actually
mhm,
much more expansive
mhm.
than most
Right,
humans.
because it has the whole of the internet.
Right. That's right. So it's not even about education
Mhm,
level or anything like that. It's
mhm,
just most humans don't
mhm,
actually use a super rich or
mhm,
very vocabulary.
mhm,
It overuses transition words and phrases. Like humans, when we speak out loud, we don't
mhm,
use a lot of those phrases,
mhm,
right? So then when you see a lot of it in writing, it can feel sort of overly
mhm,
academic or something like that. So
mhm,
those are something that I typically look for and try to
mhm,
pull some of those out because it just doesn't
mhm,
feel very human.
mhm,
It overuses adjectives. It does what we call like keyword stuffing, where
mhm,
sometimes it's just like over relying on
mhm.
keywords. Where
Right. Mhm,
again, if a human were talking about it, you wouldn't necessarily do that. You would use synonyms and things like
mhm,
that. It generalizes a lot, right?
mhm,
Making statements like for many or
mhm,
overall, right? So
mhm,
those are things to look
mhm,
for. So I think that your point is such a good one. It doesn't always
mhm,
sound very human. It can be too perfect.
mhm,
But you can actually identify like what are the qualities or
mhm,
the features of unedited AI
mhm,
writing that make it sound that way,
mhm,
and you can focus your editing
mhm,
efforts on
mhm.
those things.
Right. So let's flip it. how do we make sure that we're sounding more human?
Yeah. So first of all, look for those things. When you're
Mm-hmm,
editing
mm-hmm,
if you're going to
mm-hmm,
use AI to draft your
mm-hmm,
copy, don't assume that because it's technically correct or
mm-hmm,
because it uses a lot of big words, that
mm-hmm,
actually doesn't mean that it's
mm-hmm,
done a very good job,
mm-hmm,
because it may be difficult for your readers to
mm-hmm,
connect with you or connect with that
mm-hmm,
language. So done doesn't mean perfect.
mm-hmm,
Right? Just because it's done it and it exists doesn't mean that it's in its
mm-hmm,
final
mm-hmm,
form.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think if you have done some work to analyze your own voice,
mm-hmm,
voice is like the way you define your own voice, think about it in terms of like words you often use or phrases that you often use. What are your sort of common sentence structures or punctuation? Like, are you someone who uses a lot of exclamation points, for example? Which again, we could talk for an hour
mm-hmm,
about that.
right. Mm-hmm,
If that's part of your voice,
mm-hmm,
enthusiasm, cheerfulness,
mm-hmm,
being upbeat, right? One, you could, of course, prompt
mm-hmm,
AI to use some of these
mm-hmm.
things in its writing to make it
It
sound.
might not put them in the right places. That's the
Yeah,
funny thing.
that's right.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
you better go through and check. So
mm-hmm,
you could ask AI to do some of that for you, or you could have your own checklist of
mm-hmm,
like, okay, these are the features that I want to
mm-hmm,
make sure I'm infusing in here to sound more human, to
mm-hmm,
sound warmer, whatever it is. And then when you go to edit the
mm-hmm,
drafts that AI has produced for
mm-hmm,
you, always check for those things.
mm-hmm,
So look for
mm-hmm,
opportunities, vary the sentence
mm-hmm,
structure, or break up your paragraphs a little bit more, or use the word you. So ChatGPT, for example, is not great at speaking directly to the reader using the word
okay.
you, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the
It
way.
might say the reader as opposed to you,
Exactly.
you do this. Mm-hmm,
That's right. But speaking directly
mm-hmm,
to a reader using the word
mm-hmm,
you, that's one of the best ways to communicate,
mm-hmm,
to connect and to
mm-hmm,
see more human, right?
mm-hmm,
So I would say come up with a short list of
mm-hmm,
these things that you
mm-hmm,
feel like make your writing
mm-hmm,
sound warmer, more connective, more
mm-hmm,
human, and just edit for those things
mm-hmm.
before you hit send.
Right. Well, and of course, adding our own stories are
Yeah.
what's important. And even, just simple things like when I was sending the proposal to the client, I worked with them where I was actually proposing that we increase what we're doing with them. And so, I put in there, uh, you know, uh, uh, know you had a great holiday season because I saw the pictures on Facebook. Too bad about our both of our college football teams losing. Of course, there's no way that AI would know that. And the funny thing is, I actually ran that part through AI. I said, "Here's the email that I wrote," and it said that is an extremely good use of connecting with the reader. And I
Mm.
went, "Yay!"
Yeah, I love this. Yeah, adding in personal
Mm-hmm,
details
mm-hmm,
from a conversation that you've had with someone. Yeah, I met with a new prospective client this
mm-hmm,
morning, and or it's people I've worked with before, but it's a new VP who was
mm-hmm,
hired, and she was telling me about her 13-month-old
mm-hmm,
daughter, and I
mm-hmm,
asked what her daughter's
mm-hmm,
name
mm-hmm,
was, and like I made a note of
mm-hmm,
that. AI doesn't. I'm not
mm-hmm,
going to put that into AI,
mm-hmm,
right? But I'll add that in if I
mm-hmm,
use AI to write a
mm-hmm,
follow-up email to her.
mm-hmm,
Mention
mm-hmm,
something about that. So I love that
mm-hmm.
example.
Right. It's funny. I am a guest on other people's podcasts, and one guy was sending me, here's the format of the program, yada yada yada, and he said, please be sure to use my name several times, and name and mention the name of the program. I'd never had somebody directly tell me to do that. I just thought that was very funny because I tend to do it as I'm talking. I might, now Grace, when we do this, whatever. But, he said it will make it seem more personal when you do those things.
Yeah. Yep, so true. And those are
Mm-hmm,
types of things that I'll
mm-hmm,
add into my writing to
mm-hmm,
make it sound more
mm-hmm,
personal. If I'm sending an email, I do that. And also when I'm teaching, right?
mm-hmm,
If so when I'm talking about writing, just,
mm-hmm,
yeah, face to face, if
mm-hmm,
I'm in a Zoom workshop or an
mm-hmm,
in-person workshop, yeah, like calling people by name is
mm-hmm,
something that I work at, try to, build a
mm-hmm,
human connection. Why wouldn't you do that in your
mm-hmm.
writing?
Right.
And And it's so true. ChatGPT, whatever, these programs don't know your relationship with another person. And so you can tell them, you can give them instruction,
Right.
but ultimately, tone, for example, is deeply nuanced. It's deeply subjective. You have to develop your own judgment about these things, and because you're responsible for your relationships, not AI,
Right.
you're responsible for your relationships. And
Right. Yeah, I was on one of my mastermind groups yesterday, and somebody said something, and my response. Now, you need to understand, I'm a huge Big Bang Theory fan, so you kind of have to know that before you understand my response. And luckily, all these people on the call were too, because he said something, and out of my mouth popped sarcasm, Sheldon. Because on the show, of course, Sheldon always had problem understanding what sarcasm was, because he took everything very literally.
Yep.
And and I mean, that's very true with AI. It's going to be very literal, and it's not going to, it might get that it's a joke, it might not. That's just kind of where, again, you have to put and maybe it's that you just put ha ha in there or something like that, right? When you're going back through and writing it, just to make sure that people understand, okay, no, that was sarcasm, or that was supposed to be a joke. And of course, we all know, depending on, you might just not want to do those things, right? Because if somebody could misinterpret, maybe you don't want to write it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And so that maybe takes us back to this idea of like when even to use it and when not to, right? Like if something is deeply sensitive or complex or nuanced, it's an interpersonal communication, an email or something like that, maybe that's not the time to use your AI tools. Maybe that's the time that even if it takes a little extra effort, you do it yourself, right? If the relationship is really going to be affected by something. So I think developing this judgment too around when is AI actually going to help me do this task faster or better, and when is it not?
Right. And faster and better are not the same thing.
That's right. That's right. And so, yeah, I think that, that is just a conversation that, we're having with a lot of people in workshops is, you have people who are scared of AI, the idea of adding tech, and it just feels very intimidating. And then you have folks who are so excited about it that they're using it all the time. Both of these things we can, but the thing is, sometimes if you're using it all the time, you're also sometimes you're not always saving yourself time, right? You're always making something.
And am I just being lazy?
Yeah, yep. And what are the skills that you still need to know and therefore should practice occasionally, right? Like just because AI can do something for faster or better too, doesn't mean that it always should.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like with anything, we've got fast food, you can make it yourself. Okay. Sometimes you're going to make it yourself. Sometimes you're going to go to McDonald's.
That's right. And so I feel strongly that people should be using it. You should be learning it. You should be trying it. You should be improving it. But that does not mean that everything you write should involve AI. You need to have the judgment about, when is this actually going to help and when is it not?
Right. So we've only got about 5 minutes left. Where do you see, we talked, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have even been doing this. What do you see down the road for AI and business writing?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, this is not an original thought, but we all know, by now this, and maybe you even said it earlier in this conversation. Someone I spoke to today said this, but it's not necessarily that AI is going to take your job, right? It's maybe somebody who knows how to use AI better than you is going to take your job. So I think when you're thinking about business communication, when you're thinking about professional communication, come up with some guidelines for yourself. people need to start coming up with some guidelines for themselves. When am I going to use this? When am I not?
Mm-hmm.
What are the skills? What's sort of like a basic level of proficiency that I
Mm-hmm.
think I need to have in my field? Just in terms of where I see this going, it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to become
Mm-hmm.
more and more common. It's obviously not going anywhere.
That genie is not going
That
back in
gene
that
is
bottle.
going back in the bottle. And I mentioned earlier in this conversation, but more and more organizations are developing their own,
Mm-hmm.
internal AI tools. So I guess I would also recommend that the folks not get too tied to one
Mm-hmm.
particular AI tool. They are changing so
Mm-hmm.
rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you move jobs or you
Mm-hmm.
move industries, the tool that was available to you at one
Mm-hmm.
workplace may not be the tool that's
Right.
available. So I think agility when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to AI is useful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe challenge yourself to use a tool that isn't the one that's
Mm-hmm.
available to you at work,
Mm-hmm.
or something, just so you're sort of not
Mm-hmm.
becoming stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Practice, think a little bit about the level of proficiency that you think you need in your
Mm-hmm.
field. Don't get too tied to one tool
Mm-hmm.
or another because it's here to stay.
Right.
So I'll just add one more thing, which is especially with writing, you need to find out when you get into a new role or a new organization in particular, find
Ah.
out
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what is my organization's stance on use
Mm.
generative
Mm-hmm.
AI to write at work. Some organizations, some of the clients I
Mm-hmm.
speak super pro AI. They
Mm-hmm.
want people
Mm-hmm.
use it as an integral part.
Mm-hmm.
Others very much frowned upon.
Ah, so if you start using AI, there goes your job.
That's right. So
Mm-hmm.
so I just would say, in the next
Mm-hmm.
5 years, don't assume if you move
Mm-hmm.
jobs or you move you move
Mm-hmm.
you change industries or whatever, do
Mm-hmm.
not assume that the
Mm-hmm.
expectations or standards will be the
Mm-hmm.
same. Find out. This is
Mm-hmm.
something you should do when
Mm-hmm.
you move into a new role.
Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. And of course, the funny thing is it is changing very rapidly. And at some point we'll just think it and it will do it. And then we'll really be in trouble because it will write things that I was not wanting out in the world, right? But yeah, it is not going away. And when used properly, it is a fabulous business tool.
That's right.
Well, Grace, for people who are like, okay, I know I need to do it, but I'm still very confused. How do they find you and what are the services that Bold Type provides?
Yes, absolutely. So, very easy. Our website is www.boldtype.us. Please go to our website. You can contact us really easily from there. My email is super simple. It's grace@boldtype.us. So, I would love if anyone has questions or wants to talk writing training. I hope people reach out. We, primarily provide small group training at all different types of companies, all different sizes. We focus on frameworks that people can apply to any type of writing task that they have at work. And we are newly offering sort of our workshops either without AI or with AI. You
Okay.
can kind of go
Because, like
go.
you said, some companies are going to use it, some are still saying, no, not so much.
Exactly. So that's something that we're really excited about this year. We also do have a couple of self-paced options.
Ah,
Sometimes
mm-hmm,
if individuals
mm-hmm,
want to upskill their writing but don't have a big organization, learning development budget or something backing
mm-hmm,
them for small group training, we have
mm-hmm,
self-paced courses. We have coaching, one-on-one coaching
mm-hmm.
options. So we have we have ways for folks at any type of organization to work with us as a group or individually.
Great. I love it. I love it. And again, it's boldtype.us.
That's right.
Very cool. Well, this has been so much fun. And, we should do it again further on down the road to, okay, now what type of thing. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say is that AI makes it so much easier to produce clean, error-free writing. And what I mean is there are so many great tools to help you proofread your own writing now that there's less, it's interesting. We see more typos than ever before, but there's actually less excuse for typos and things like that than ever before, right? So, if you're not already, download a tool like Grammarly. It will, you can outsource, some of that kind of mechanical writing labor to a great tool. Make sure your writing is clean and error-free. It's easier than ever to do. And there are a lot of great tools to help you do that. It'll make you seem more professional. People will feel more confident in you and in your abilities. And that goes a long way.
Oh my gosh. This has been so much fun. I have been having a great conversation with Grace Foster, the co-founder of Bold Type. I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.